Are you looking to spend your gems wisely on the best banners? Well, you've come to the right place. In this video, we're diving into an accurate and detailed tier list of the units in Anime Reborn. We've carefully analyzed each and every tower in the game, taking into account their performance across all modes, and ranked them from the absolute best to the ones you might want to avoid. So whether you're aiming to strengthen your team or just want to make sure your gems are going to the right places, this guide will help you make the best decisions. Sit back, relax, and let's go through this tier list together. Whether you're a seasoned player or just getting started, this breakdown will give you all the info you need to dominate the game. So scroll down and let's jump right into it. You won't want to miss out on the top picks, trust me. I'm quickly moving on to the video, and I'm ranking units in Anime Reborn. Before we start, if you enjoy these types of list videos, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Enjoy watching. Joy. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Ahigo, Luffy PTS, Naruto, Mr. Set, Sakura, Usagi PTS, Susake, Kurulin, Zero PTS, and Tintin. Alright, let's dive into the C tier units of Anime Reborn. These units are far from terrible, but they definitely don't stand out as top tier options. First up, we've got Ihigo. While he's a hybrid unit with decent range and solid DPS, his ability to target air units really sets him apart, especially early in the game. If you're just starting, Ahigo might be the best option you've got, making him a good pick for those first few levels. He's got a nice balance of power that can handle both land and air enemies, but once you start unlocking better units, he'll likely get replaced. Then there's Luffy PTS, who's got that cone AoE attack. While he's not going to blow your mind, he's probably one of the better default units you get when logging in for the first time. You can't really go wrong with him for the early stages, but as you unlock stronger units, Luffy will definitely start to show his age. Still, he does the job and is pretty fun to use when you're still getting the hang of things. Now, let's talk about Naruto. This guy gets an interesting boost where he increases his damage for every other Naruto in range. He's a rare unit that actually has some viability, especially if you manage to get multiple copies of him. While he might not be a game changer, he can hold his own and definitely has some utility. Unfortunately, not all rare units in this tier are as exciting as Naruto. Mr. Set, for example, has a cone AoE attack, but he only targets ground units. It's just not enough to make him a solid choice. We also have Sakura, who's one of the weakest rare units in the game. She's cheap to place, but that's about all she has going for her. If you don't have better options, she'll do, but honestly, you'll probably want to replace her as soon as possible. The same can be said for Zero PTS, whose DPS just isn't up to par with other rare units. Tintin is probably the worst of the bunch though. Her passive 10% attack boost doesn't do enough to make her relevant. She's definitely one you'll want to skip unless you've got no other options. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Boulder Lee, Leo, Magma, Yasuke, Vigoto, Sensei, Heie, Inoke, Seijin, PTS, and Pun. Alright, let's talk about some B-tier units in Anime Reborn, the ones that aren't quite the top-tier legends, but still have their moments. These units can be a bit tricky to work with, but hey, if you know how to use them right, they can definitely get the job done. Let's start with Boulder Lee. Now, Boulder Lee might not be the flashiest pick, but on max upgrades, he's full AoE, which is pretty solid for those long infinite runs. The only catch, upgrading him in shorter modes is a pain, and he's not the best for those fast-paced stages. Still, if you've got the patience, Boulder Lee can really shine. Then, we have Leo. I mean, the dude applies a burn DOT, and he's got that shield-breaking ability, so he's not totally useless. But here's the thing, his DPS and SPA are on the lower end. When you compare him to other legendaries, he just feels a bit lacking, and honestly, he gets outshined by other units in the long run. Magma, his near twin, doesn't bring much more to the table either. The difference between them in terms of DPS and performance is so small that you could easily swap one for the other. Not terrible, but not game-changing either. On the other hand, we have Yasuke. Now, this guy's got good DPS and decent range, but compared to other legendary units, he's still a bit underwhelming. In AR, Anime Reborn, where every bit of damage counts, Yasuke just doesn't stand out as much as he should. His potential is good, but it's still outclassed by stronger units that pack more punch. If you want to use him, you'll have to really make sure he's placed well to get the most out of him. Let's switch gears a bit and talk about Vigoto. His passive that boosts his range sounds awesome in theory, but in practice, it doesn't do enough to make him a top-tier pick. Sure, his range can be useful, but when you're comparing him to units that do much more with their abilities, Vigoto just falls short. And don't even get me started on Sensei. He's okay, but he doesn't do anything to stand out. Good DPS, low spay, and solid range. But there's no AoE, no useful passive, and nothing that really makes you go, wow, I need this guy in my lineup. Finally, let's look at the epic units. Heie and Inoki are two of the worst epics in the game. Low range, low damage, not really much going for them, to be honest. They're not terrible, but they just don't offer anything worth getting excited about. And then we have Seijin PTS, the rare unit that is easily the best one in the B tier. Full AoE, burn-on attacks, crazy range, and 6 max placements, this guy can carry you through early stages without breaking a sweat. If you're playing AR, make sure to have him on your team. Pun, while not having AoE, can still be super useful with his passive. He gets stronger the more puns you place, and he's crazy cheap to place down, making him perfect for beginners. Definitely a solid pick to help you get started. So, while the B tier units might not be the best, they've got their place if used right. They might need a little extra TLC, but they can definitely hold their own if you play smart. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Kuzar, Droid 18, Jonas, Uryu, Gurdon, Zenit, Red Boss, and Neja. Let's talk about some of the A tier units in Anime Reborn. These guys aren't quite the top of the food chain, but they're certainly fantastic choices, especially if you're just starting out or need a solid backup for your main team. First up, we've got Kuzar, a beast when it comes to DPS and shield breaking. With an insanely low SPA and decent range, he really shines early on. He's the kind of unit you'll want on your team for those early stages, because he can carry you through tough battles, clearing out shields and dealing solid damage without breaking a sweat. Next, let's look at Droid 18. Now, she's not as flashy as some of the other legendaries, but what she lacks in slow passives, like Uryu's 25% chance, she more than makes up for with insane value for her cost. As an ultra-cheap hill unit, she can dish out pretty solid DPS, and that makes her a great choice for those who need a dependable, budget-friendly unit that can pull its weight in the later stages. And then there's Jonas, a hybrid DPS and shield breaker who comes with the bonus of burning enemies with his attacks. He's solid, no doubt, but if you're looking for an outright powerhouse, there might be a couple of other legendary units out there that do the job a little better. Still, his burn ability is definitely something to keep in mind if you need some consistent damage over time. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Hawkeyes, Itaha, Brolio, Noelle, Oda, Super Gohu, Pain, Yoon Gassi, and Sun Prodigy Blazing. Alright, let's dive right into the powerhouses of Anime Reborn. If you're looking to bring the heat and dominate both mobs and bosses, these S-tier units are your go-to picks. First up, we've got Hawkeyes. This guy isn't just your average unit. His passive gives him plus 100% damage against bosses, and when evolved, that jumps to a massive plus 250%. Talk about an insane boss killer. But that's not all. His cone AoE attack and low SPA make him a beast at clearing mobs too. Whether it's a boss or a bunch of small enemies, Hawkeyes has got you covered. Next, we've got Itaha, who's just pure fire, literally. With his burn effects and excellent DPS, Itaha can melt through mobs like butter. He's also got great range, making him perfect for hitting those pesky enemies from a distance. The best part? He's a hybrid unit, so he can handle both air and ground targets with ease. If you're still waiting on Hawkeyes, Itaha's got your back for boss fights too. Moving on to Brolio, this hybrid unit really shines in longer matches like Infinite Mode. He's got full AoE once evolved, which means he's great at clearing out groups of enemies in no time. His DPS and range are solid, but it's his passive that really makes him shine. As he attacks, his damage increases, which makes him a total monster the longer the match goes on. Trust me, you won't regret having Brolio on your team. Then we've got Noelle, the Hill Mythic unit that's both a solid DPS unit and a secondary farm option. Her placement cost is pretty low, which is fantastic for starting out, and her plus 100% yen from kills means she's always adding to your coffers. However, her line AoE attack as a hill unit can hold her back a bit when it comes to raw DPS, so be aware of that. But she's still a solid pick for farming and support. Now, let's talk about Oda. This guy has a huge AoE attack once fully upgraded, and his crit buffing passive adds some nice extra damage to the mix. However, Oda does have one big drawback. He can't target air units, which can be a real pain when you're facing off against flying enemies. While he's a strong pick overall, you might want to consider other mythics for more versatility. And finally, we've got Super Gohu. On paper, he looks pretty decent, especially for a hill unit. His DPS is alright, but his line attack and mediocre passive really drag him down. If you've got him, he can be useful in certain situations, but he's definitely not the first choice when you've got other units like Hawkeyes or Itaha available. Still, he's a decent option to hold you over if you're waiting for something stronger. So, there you have it, your top tier units in Anime Reborn. From powerhouse boss killers to solid hybrid attackers, these guys are the ones you'll want to focus on. Each one brings something unique to the table, and they'll make your gameplay smoother, faster, and more fun. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right: Mercury, Dragon Emperor, Delta Brothers, King Rimura, 21, Light, Picora Yellow, Asta, Greybeard, and Gohan. Let's dive into some of the most insane units in Anime Reborn, the ones you absolutely have to have if you want to dominate the battlefield. These S+ tier units are the ones everyone's talking about right now, and trust me, if you get them, you'll be on a whole new level. So, grab your popcorn and let's break down the top picks. First up, we've got Mercury, who is seriously broken. This guy's passive makes him totally immune to those pesky enemy element damage debuffs. Basically, no matter what mode you're in, Mercury will always be putting in work. Not only does he have a line AoE attack, but he also summons units that scale with his damage. He's the perfect balance of utility and DPS, and honestly, he's just too good to pass up right now. Then there's Dragon Emperor, and oh boy, if you've got him, you're set. This unit is a full AoE hybrid, with stats that will leave you speechless. The only thing is, grinding for him can be a real pain, but once you've got him, his evolved support passive will be a game changer. His power makes him a solid meta pick, and trust me, it's worth the grind if you can get him. Now, let's talk about Delta Brothers. These guys are the best shield breakers in the game, bar none. Their hybrid line attack, combined with their insane DMG and SPA scaling passives, make them an absolute must-have for breaking through those tough enemies. And when they pop their full AoE ability, yes, they have that too, mobs don't stand a chance. If you've been struggling with shields, these two are going to be your best friends. King Rimura might not have full AoE like some of the other units, but his scaling passives and solid DPS make him a solid pick for infinite mode. He's one of those units that gets better and better the more you use him, but don't expect him to carry you through everything. He's good, but not quite as OP as some others on this list. On the other hand, 21 is a total beast. Full AoE on max upgrade? Check. Insane stats? Check. And she's a heal unit, so she can literally solo carry you through most modes. Plus, she gets even better as she evolves, making her one of the most meta units you can grab right now. She's the definition of a powerhouse and perfect for anyone looking to crush the competition. Last but not least, we've got Light, a hybrid unit who's got it all. Full AoE, summons, and a damage buff for other Light units within range. He's a big deal, especially when you get Miracle on him. If you're running a team of Light units, you'll want this guy on your side. He can buff your squad while absolutely tearing through enemies, making him one of the most sought-after units in Anime Reborn. So, there you have it. These S+ tier units aren't just strong, they're game changers. If you're lucky enough to get your hands on them, you'll be dominating the battlefield in no time. Which one's your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Darkbeard, Nanami, Water Goddess, Ruki, and Killa. Alright, let's dive into the world of support units in Anime Reborn. If you're looking for characters who can really shift the tide of battle with their abilities, then these guys are exactly what you need. Some are great for providing buffs and debuffs, while others excel at crowd control or giving you that extra DPS boost. Let's break down some of the best support units to have in your lineup. First up, we've got Darkbeard, and let me tell you, this guy is a beast when it comes to AoE support. Once he's maxed out, he's dishing out area of effect damage left and right, and to top it off, he slows enemies with his attacks, which can be a total game changer. The only downside? His upgrades are on the pricey side, so you'll need to grind a bit to fully unlock his potential. But once you do, he's a support unit that's hard to beat. Then there's Nanami, a support unit that might not shine too brightly but is incredibly handy against bosses. His ability to increase enemy damage taken by 35% makes him a must-have when you're up against those big baddies. While he's not as flashy as some of the other supports, that extra bit of DPS can really make a difference in longer fights. However, outside of boss battles, he doesn't do much else, so he's not the most versatile unit on the field. Next, let's talk about Water Goddess. If you need someone to buff your range, she's your go-to. On top of that, she can deal respectable damage to regular mobs and even help out with shield breaking, which is always handy in those tougher rounds. While she might not be the top DPS character, her utility and range buffs can turn the tide of battle when you're dealing with large crowds. She's one of those units that works best when paired with other high-damage units. Now, if you're after a legendary support unit, Ruki is your girl. She's arguably the best support when it comes to placement. Her passive freeze effect is absolutely clutch, especially against fast-moving enemies. And if you were wondering about her DPS, it's solid. Not only can she freeze enemies in their tracks, but she's also contributing decent damage, making her a must-have if you want a balanced, crowd-controlling support unit that doesn't sacrifice too much offensive power. Last but not least, we have Killa, a unit with a stun and good SPA, seconds per attack, which makes him an excellent choice for crowd control. He's not as flashy as Ruki or Darkbeard, but he does bring something to the table, especially since he can target air units at max upgrades. That's a pretty useful feature if you don't have a legendary with air targeting. While he may not outshine the others in raw performance, his utility, especially for air units, gives him a solid spot in your support lineup. So there you have it, the best support units in Anime Reborn. Whether you need some serious AoE damage, a boss-slaying boost, or just some solid crowd control, these units have got you covered. Happy gaming, and remember, building the right team is key to crushing those tough waves. The units in this tier are, in order from top left to bottom right, Time King, Speedcart, Yano Yamo, Lucky One, and Bulba. Alright, let's talk about some of the absolute game changers in Anime Reborn. If you're grinding through Infinite or just trying to build the perfect team, these units will be the MVPs you need in your arsenal. First up, we have Time King. Now, this guy is not for the faint of heart. His placement cost is sky high, so he's not exactly a go-to for short game modes. But if you're diving into Infinite, oh boy, Time King is a beast. His DPS is insane, his range is crazy good, and that 55% slow passive? It's a total game changer, slowing down every enemy within his range. And just when you think it can't get any better, his active stops all enemies in their tracks for several seconds. Time King is the support you didn't know you needed, but once you have him, you'll never go back. Then there's Speedcart, the expensive but necessary farm unit for any serious Infinite run. Speedcart isn't just about making money. He comes with a special perk that reduces the upgrade cost of the first 5 units placed in his range by 15%. That's huge. If you're looking for a long-term strategy and want to maximize your resources, Speedcart should be a key part of your setup. His value goes up as the game drags on, and he'll help you scale your defenses way faster. Next, we've got Yano, and let me tell you, this unit is pure gold for support. Yano's 50% slow is practically permanent, making it tough for enemies to even reach your front lines. On top of that, he's a hybrid with multi-hit attacks, and he buffs all your wind-type allies. If you're running a wind-themed team, Yano is a must-have. His slow and support buffs make him one of the most reliable units in the game, and honestly, his ability to stall enemies is just too good to pass up. Now, Yamo isn't your typical support unit. While he does have strong support elements, he also brings the pain as a DPS unit. Yamo's synergy with dark units like Asta makes him a huge asset to any dark-type squad. He buffs those units with plus a 35% damage, plus a 15% crit rate and 15% crit damage for all your units in range. His DPS isn't shabby either, so he's not just standing around doing nothing. Yamo brings both the damage and the buffs, making him a solid all-around unit to have. Finally, let's talk about Lucky One. This unit is a bit of a wild card. He stuns enemies for 3 seconds with each attack, which is great for crowd control. On top of that, he gets stat boosts when he recovers from stun, making him even more effective the longer he's in the fight. As a support, he's fantastic, but don't expect him to carry as a DPS unit. His damage output isn't quite up to par with some of the others in the game. Still, if you're looking for a unit that disrupts the enemy and supports your team, Lucky One is a top pick. So there you have it, some of the absolute top-tier support units in Anime Reborn. Whether you're slowing down enemies, boosting your allies, or farming like a pro, these units have you covered. The right combination of these can make your team unstoppable in Infinite mode and beyond. The video ends here. See you in another video. Don't forget to subscribe.